Stop everything right now. Look closely at the geopolitical chessboard, because the mainstream media is completely blind to the strategic transformation happening right in front of us. They are busy broadcasting partisan debates and endless panel discussions about budget optimizations. They are missing the catastrophic collapse of American deterrence unfolding in real time. According to commercial satellite tracking and intelligence back channels cited by Fox News earlier this morning, something highly unusual and deeply alarming is actively shifting the balance of power in the Middle East. If the preliminary reports hold true, we are looking at the immediate aftermath of a catastrophic policy backfire. Let me start with the undeniable facts on the ground. Exactly 72 hours ago, an internal memorandum from Washington was leaked to the press, signaling a deliberate tactical withdrawal, a so-called scaling back of the military footprint to de-escalate regional tensions. The elites in charge believed that stepping back would cool the temperature. They were wrong, dead wrong. Within those 72 hours, satellite imagery has identified a decentralized formation of over 40 heavy armored vehicles. These are not official state militaries. These are non-state actors, armed factions operating without official insignias, moving swiftly across the desert. And right now, preliminary intelligence estimates suggest they have positioned themselves less than 5 miles from the perimeter of the heavily fortified Green Zone. 5 miles. That is not a safe distance. That is the staging ground for a strategic decapitation. The planners in Washington thought their strategic retreat would save money and save face. Instead, their hesitation has been weaponized against them. By signaling a withdrawal, they did not create peace. They created a massive, uncontrollable power vacuum. These armed factions did not see an olive branch. They saw an open door. They saw institutional weakness, and they are currently operating under the assumption that the defensive perimeter has been neutralized by political hesitation. This is the reality of asymmetric warfare. You do not need to defeat a superpower in a direct firefight. You just need to wait until they decide it is too expensive to stay, and then you walk in and take the keys to an infrastructure worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Before I show you the horrifying ripple effects this will have on the global stage, I need you to do something. Go to the comments section right now and type the word vacuum. Just that one word. Because I need to know you understand the gravity of the void that has just been opened in the region. To understand the sheer magnitude of this failure, we cannot just look at the armored vehicles idling on the horizon. We need to pull the lens away from the dust and sand of the Middle Eastern perimeter. Let us shift our focus directly to the air-conditioned briefing rooms of Washington, where the actual collapse of institutional authority began. What happens inside those air-conditioned briefing rooms in Washington is a fundamental misunderstanding of how global power actually operates. The bureaucrats look at spreadsheets. They look at budget optimization protocols. They analyze risk matrices. But they entirely forget that deterrence is an illusion maintained only by the absolute resolve to project force. According to intelligence briefings heavily cited by the Wall Street Journal just yesterday, the true casualty of this leaked withdrawal memo was not a physical military base. It was the complete institutional collapse of the local allied command structure. Think very carefully about the psychology of power. Deterrence is not measured by the number of cruise missiles sitting in a launch tube. Deterrence is not measured by the thickness of reinforced concrete blast walls. Deterrence is measured entirely by the perceived willpower of a superpower to use devastating force. The exact moment the internal discussions about a tactical withdrawal became public, that willpower evaporated into thin air. The invisible shield holding the entire region together vanished overnight. The Wall Street Journal reporting indicates a catastrophic fracture within the local security forces. These are the very partners trained, funded, and equipped by Western taxpayers for over a decade. But within 48 hours of the Washington leak, intercepted communications and local reconnaissance revealed mass desertions at forward operating bases. The local commanders did not stand and fight. They did not hold the defensive line. They saw the superpower packing its bags, and they immediately initiated back-channel negotiations with the approaching armed factions. You cannot blame the local forces. When the absolute umbrella of protection is suddenly folded away, survival becomes the only mathematical equation that matters. The institutional rot is absolute. The elites in Washington believed they were managing a highly controlled, phased reduction of military personnel. What they actually engineered was a cascading, region-wide surrender. This brings us to the core paradox of modern strategic planning. The architects of this withdrawal firmly believed they were avoiding a costly military entanglement. They wanted to save money. They wanted to avoid bad press. But by projecting institutional weakness, they guaranteed a hostile takeover. Officers abandoned their posts. Highway checkpoints were left completely unmanned. Right now, an estimated $850 million in advanced radar installations, heavily fortified bunkers, and encrypted communication nodes are sitting unprotected. The local forces knew the militant armor was moving in. They knew the air support was grounded by political hesitation, and they chose self-preservation over a suicide mission. Washington tried to de-escalate. Instead, they handed over the keys to a kingdom of military hardware without forcing the enemy to fire a single bullet. The power vacuum is not merely a physical space in the desert, it is a terrifying vacuum of authority, and geopolitical nature always violently fills a vacuum. But to truly grasp why these decentralized factions moved with such lethal precision, with such calculated patience, we cannot just look at the events of the past week. We must turn the clock back. We must look at the historical and ideological inertia driving this exact scenario. Let me take you back to the historical blueprint that predicted every single step of this disaster. Let me take you back to the historical blueprint that predicted every single step of this disaster. Look closely at the intelligence assessments from August of 2021, or even the geopolitical collapse in Southeast Asia in 1975. The institutional pattern is mathematically identical. Western military doctrine is fundamentally obsessed with 4-year political election cycles. A president needs a diplomatic victory. An administration needs to fulfill a campaign promise to optimize the defense budget. They manage international security on a strict, artificial timeline dictated entirely by domestic polling data. But the decentralized armed factions surrounding the Green Zone right now, they do not have election cycles. They operate on the concept of multi-generational ideological warfare. They study the institutional memory of past withdrawals. They know exactly how to exploit the democratic vulnerabilities of a global superpower. There is a deeply ingrained intelligence adage used by these proxy networks. You have the watches, but we have the time. And time is exactly what Washington just handed them on a silver platter. By publicly leaking a strategy for scaling back, the superpower did not negotiate a peaceful transition. They simply handed the enemy a countdown clock. The militants did not need to launch a massive, coordinated offensive that would invite a devastating aerial retaliation. They just had to wait in the shadows. They maintained their decentralized structures, surviving in the gray zones, absorbing targeted strikes, and quietly conserving their operational strength. This is the terrifying reality of asymmetric warfare that the mainstream media refuses to explain to you. The proxy forces understand that a superpower can win every single tactical battle, execute every precision strike, and remove every high-value target from the equation, but still lose the strategic war simply by losing patience. When Washington signaled its intention to pivot its geopolitical focus elsewhere, the militant factions instantly activated their dormant cells. They executed a textbook shadow siege, waiting for the defensive perimeter to hollow itself out from the inside. The catastrophic backfire here is absolute. The very policies designed to safely extricate the superpower from a prolonged entanglement have guaranteed that the hostile elements will emerge stronger, fully equipped with abandoned infrastructure. The elites thought they were closing a costly chapter. Instead, they wrote the ultimate training manual for future insurgencies. But this failure of deterrence does not just stay isolated in a distant desert. It never does. The collapse of a global security umbrella sends immediate, measurable shockwaves through the international system. And the first place those shockwaves hit is not a distant military base. It is your wallet. Let us shift our lens away from the ideological strategies of proxy fighters and look directly at the cold, unforgiving numbers currently flashing red on the financial terminals of Wall Street and London. Look directly at the cold, unforgiving numbers currently flashing red on the financial terminals of Wall Street and London. According to live market data tracked by Bloomberg earlier today, the geopolitical risk premium on Brent crude has already started to violently price in this exact power vacuum. The withdrawal memo did not just signal a localized military retreat, it broadcasted the potential disruption of critical energy corridors to the entire world. When decentralized armed factions are allowed to operate within a 5-mile radius of a major geopolitical anchor point, the maritime insurance premiums for global shipping skyrocket overnight. The market understands what the politicians flatly refuse to admit. A non-state actor now has the theoretical capability to choke off regional stability at will. You are going to pay for this profound strategic failure every single time you purchase fuel or rely on global supply chains. But the economic bleeding is only the first phase. The geopolitical pivot happening right now behind closed doors is far more permanent and far more dangerous. When Washington actively chooses to step back and abandon its forward operating bases, it does not mean the region magically stabilizes. It means the apex predators of the multipolar world immediately move in to feast on the remains. According to diplomatic backchannels and strategic assessments highlighted by the Associated Press, Beijing and Moscow are not deploying mechanized infantry to fill this new void. They are much more calculated than that. They are deploying state-backed energy conglomerates, sovereign wealth funds, and private security contractors. They are weaponizing the exact vacuum created by American hesitation to lock down exclusive, multi-decade resource contracts and telecommunication partnerships. This is the catastrophic backfire happening in real time. The elites in Washington ordered a tactical retreat to save a few $billion in defense spending and secure a temporary public relations victory. But in doing so, they just handed their greatest geopolitical competitors an absolute monopoly over the future architecture of the region. The rival superpowers do not need to fire a single shot or launch a single missile to establish regional hegemony. They simply wait for Washington to lose its geopolitical nerve, pack up its personnel, and leave. Then they walk right into the abandoned green zones with a briefcase full of infrastructure loans and security guarantees. The global superpower removed itself from the equation to avoid a localized conflict, but mathematically guaranteed the rapid expansion of its primary rivals. The deterrence doctrine has completely collapsed, replaced by a frantic scramble for influence. And this leaves us with the ultimate, terrifying, unanswered question currently paralyzing the strategic planners at the Pentagon. When the catastrophic consequences of this surrender finally break the global supply chains, exactly how much blood and how many trillions of dollars will Washington have to sacrifice to fight its way back into a region it just handed away for free? To answer that, we must look at the exact inventory of what was left behind in the sand. Let me show you the ultimate, catastrophic backfire of this entire operation. We are not just talking about empty tents and rusted barbed wire. According to conservative financial estimates floating through the defense corridors, Washington just abandoned roughly $850 million in state-of-the-art, turnkey military infrastructure. We are talking about biometric security perimeters. We are talking about advanced early warning radar arrays. We are talking about subterranean command bunkers engineered to withstand direct hits from heavy artillery. The strategic planners in the Capitol ordered a withdrawal to save taxpayers from funding a prolonged engagement. But look closely at the cruel, undeniable paradox they just engineered. By fleeing the theater to cut costs, the superpower essentially acted as a free, multi-million-dollar construction company for the very decentralized armed factions they spent the last 20 years trying to neutralize. The proxies did not have to spend a single dime. They did not have to smuggle a single bag of cement across a heavily monitored border. They simply waited out the political clock, walked through the open gates, and inherited a fortress. This is the absolute apex of institutional collapse. The withdrawal was strictly designed to de-escalate regional friction. But how exactly does handing a heavily fortified, technologically advanced sanctuary to a hostile non-state actor de-escalate anything? It does the exact opposite. It grants them unprecedented operational security. It allows them to launch asymmetric strikes across the region from a fortified base funded and built by Western taxpayers. The elites desperately wanted to remove their forces from the crosshairs, but all they did was reposition the crosshairs directly onto the vital arteries of the global economy, leaving their adversaries infinitely stronger, infinitely more entrenched, and completely untouchable. The hesitation to project force has birthed a structural monster that no conventional military doctrine knows how to fight. Furthermore, this singular event is not an isolated tactical error. It is a global broadcast. Every proxy militia and every geopolitical rival from Eastern Europe to the Indo-Pacific is watching this scenario unfold. They are watching a superpower voluntarily surrender an $850 million footprint out of sheer political exhaustion. The message is loud, and it is clear. You do not need to defeat the strongest military on Earth on the battlefield. You just need to exhaust their political will. The cost of this weakness is incalculable. It completely shatters the very foundation of global deterrence. And the window to peacefully fix this monumental strategic error has already closed. The board is locked. The vacuum is filled. Now, we are standing on the precipice of the fallout. I am going to show you exactly how this ends. Because based on the intelligence models sitting on the desks of the Pentagon right now, there are only three possible futures for this geopolitical nightmare. Scenario 1. A total institutional collapse of the local host government within 90 days. The armed factions do not even need to fire a weapon. They simply blockade the capital. Without the security umbrella of the superpower, the local currency evaporates, foreign investments flee overnight, and the regional military command fractures completely. The regime falls not to a barrage of artillery, but to a silent, inevitable strangulation engineered by the very non-state actors Washington thought it was avoiding. Scenario 2. A decentralized war of attrition. The remaining diplomatic compounds and the Green Zone become isolated islands. The proxy forces utilize the abandoned $850 million infrastructure to systematically cut off water grids, power stations, and supply routes. They launch relentless asymmetric drone operations against the last remaining international outposts, turning the capital into a dark, unlivable grid. Their strategy is simple. Bleed the remaining institutional presence dry, one isolated checkpoint at a time until the power vacuum is absolute. Scenario 3. The ultimate catastrophic backfire. The global economic shockwaves and the disruption of energy corridors become so severe that Washington is forced into a panicked re-intervention. But the chessboard has changed. There is no longer a permissive environment. To reclaim the exact same territory, the exact same bases they just surrendered for free, the superpower will have to execute a massive kinetic campaign against an enemy they just heavily fortified. The financial cost will skyrocket into the tens of billions, and the operational losses will be devastating. The political decision to avoid a conflict will directly ignite the most expensive and complex theater of operations this generation has ever seen. Do not trust the mainstream narratives. They are selling you the illusion of a calculated de-escalation, while the entire geopolitical architecture fractures under their feet. The system is breaking, and the economic ripple effects are already heading toward your financial reality. You need to prepare yourselves, protect your assets, subscribe to this channel right now, turn on the notifications, and share this intelligence briefing with anyone who still believes the establishment is in control. The chessboard has flipped. You need to see the next move before the rest of the world wakes up.